Let's talk about your rights and responsibilities as an American citizen. So this class is really about American government, so federal, state, and local. But one thing that you have to remember is that with the rights that you have as an American citizen comes responsibilities. So maybe it's helpful to think of Spider-Man in this case, right? We all love Spider-Man, and Spider-Man knows that with great power comes great responsibility. It's a lesson that he had to learn being a superhero, and I guess it's something that you should understand as being part of a country that really does rely on citizens not just counting on the rights that you have, but being really responsible and active and engaged members of American society. So the idea that yes, you do have lots and lots of rights, and hopefully you've learned quite a bit of them in this class. But the other side of each right really is a responsibility. And whether we're talking about the right to free speech, well, yes, you do have the right to say most things, but you also have to be responsible with what you say because you can hurt people, you could cause a panic, you could be held criminally for saying things that might harm someone, not just emotionally, but if you scream out fire and it causes a stampede and people get hurt, right? So there's a lot of responsibility that goes with free speech. And really, there's some big pieces of American society that it's helpful since you are about to kind of embark on being an adult, what it means to be a responsible member of an American society. So let's talk about a couple of the big ones. The first one would really be that, these founding fathers, people who wrote the Constitution, and the people who've added to the Constitution, the leaders that we've had in America for the last 240 years or so, they were really counting on American citizens being involved and being informed, and these citizens would actually care. So we always talk about how you have the right to vote. Well, you do, but you also should understand that everyone's kind of counting on you. That when they built this country, they were counting on you and me and others who would vote to not just show up and just start guessing and making designs out of the little circles that we have to fill in on the ballot, but really understanding the people and the issues, being an informed voter. Now, we don't have to agree, that's what voting is, but having some knowledge of what's going on is a prerequisite. It's a responsibility of someone living in this republic. The founding fathers were counting on that. Really, you can't have voters not knowing certain things. Like there's certain facts that everybody should know, and we could disagree on the route the country should take, but when you go to vote and you look at a ballot like this, for example, from Rhode Island, from the last presidential election, most people would probably do a little research before they show up. They have some idea of what they believe in, who on this ballot believes similarly to what they believe. Maybe it's a political party affiliation. Maybe, if it's just a ballot issue, whether you vote yes or no, at least some thought goes into it. So being an informed voter is part of being a responsible citizen of the United States. Now, again, you don't have to agree with the outcome. That's the point of voting. But having some information before you make the decision, that's what the founding fathers and the people who've led the country have counted on. Another part of being a responsible American citizen is serving on a jury. So you have learned that you have the right to have a lawyer, you have a right to a speedy trial, a trial by a jury of your peers, and everyone loves that. And most Americans really love the idea of having this guaranteed trial by jury if they're ever arrested. So the king or a judge isn't really deciding whether you're guilty. It's a panel of people from your neighborhood or your town or your community. They listen to the evidence and then they decide. But of course, the responsibility that goes with that is that people have to be willing to serve on a jury. So when you register to vote, your name typically goes into a big hopper or computer, and as juries are needed, it randomly just picks people to serve on the jury. So a lot of people get inconvenienced to this because, it's actually a week or two you might have to miss of work, and it's kind of a hassle. I mean, they'll pay you a little bit of money each day. The taxpayers pay a little bit of money each day. But for the most part, people do it because of their civic responsibility. But it only works, the idea of being guaranteed a trial by jury, it only works if people are willing to serve on juries. So just so you know, there's really two types of juries you can be on. One is the grand jury. These are the people who are called to really look at the evidence early on, along with the prosecutors, and decide whether or not they have enough evidence to even have a trial. The petit jury is often referred to as the trial jury. That's one you've probably seen on movies and television shows. These are the ones who would probably decide whether someone's guilty or not. But you can't have a petit jury until the trial or until the grand jury has decided that there's enough evidence to even have it. You could get called for grand or petit jury, and both are extremely important. So, again, a responsibility of an American citizen is being willing to serve on a jury. Let's talk about the military. So, you should know now, every single person in every branch of the military in the United States joined voluntarily, right? Everybody just was wanting to serve their country or looking for a job or a career, so they decided on the military. But during massive wars or times when we don't have enough people in the military, sometimes you could be called against your will. We'll talk about that in a moment. But just think for a second that, and what this country would be like if everyone just said, well, I don't feel like serving, I'll let other people protect America. If everybody thought that way, then we would obviously be vulnerable and could be conquered by other countries. And then the American Republic would die out. So think about just all the people that you might know in the military, whether it's full-time or reserves or in the National Guard. They've given up a little bit to protect the nation. Some have given up a lot, maybe even their entire lives if they've been killed in action. So it's a responsibility for those in America to consider whether or not they can serve in some capacity to keep America safe. So again, everybody in the military today, whether you're in the Air Force or Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Army, everyone has decided they wanted to be there, and so they volunteered to be. Now they get paid, but they're not forced against their will. However, if you talk to maybe your grandparents or people who are a little bit older, there have been times in American history where we've needed more people in the military, and the federal government tells men you have to be in the military. So another responsibility of being an American citizen is possible military service. For the men who are taking this class, when you turn 18, you must let the federal government know that you're 18, and then for the next 7 years, you're in this pool of people. In case there's a war and we don't have enough soldiers or sailors or airmen, then you could be drafted against your will to be part of the military. Now, we have not done this since the 1970s, but it's possible if there were ever a big conflict. Now, the rule is now, the law says that it is just males. There has been some effort maybe by some people to change it to males and females, but right now the system is males. So when you turn 18, if you're a male, you must register with a selective service. This allows our government to know who we could count on if there's a big war. So part of being a responsible citizen is registering when you turn 18. Of course, taxes are a major part of American society. You can't pay for anything in our government, whether we're talking about paying the electric bill at the White House or roads or any form of military or park rangers to keep people safe in the Smoky Mountains or whatever. All of that money comes from taxes, right? Not just federal taxes, but there are state taxes and local taxes, and that funds our government. And taxes really are the price we pay for a civilized society. So you want things in American life. You want to be able to dial 911 and have the police or the ambulance or fire truck come. Well, it costs money. You want to have an army to keep us safe? It costs money. You want to have good highways? It costs money. And that comes from taxes. So part of being a responsible American is understanding that you have to pay your taxes. And it's not really something you have a choice on, really. But You could, I guess, spend a lot of your time trying to avoid it. But in the end, if everyone did that, we wouldn't have any of the luxuries or the necessities that we really have come to depend on in the United States today. So let's talk about some of these taxes. There's really basically 4 big ones. There might be some little ones here and there on the internet, but these are the big ones. All right, so the federal income tax. So you already know that now the federal government can tax your income before you get it. So you work at Kroger, you're expecting to get a paycheck, but before you get your paycheck, you think it's going to be $100, ends up being about $83 because the federal government's going to take a chunk before you even see it. And of course, that amendment is the 16th Amendment. Incomes tax is 16th Amendment. So the federal government will take some of the money before you see it. Also, the state that you live in, generally, most states have an income tax. So, for example, in the state of Ohio, you make a paycheck. Before you get it, the state of Ohio is going to take money. Also, depending on what state you live in, but in Ohio, they have a sales tax. So you've probably had some experience with this. Even if you don't have an income, you've bought something, and you'll notice that it actually costs more than you thought it was going to cost. If you were to buy something that cost $100, when you go to pay for it, they'll charge you $106 because they have 6% sales tax. That helps fund the state that you live in. And there is property taxes. So you might own land. You have to pay taxes on that land every year. So those taxes fund schools and things around your local community. So these 4 big taxes, it's going to be impossible for you to live your life in America and not have some connection with these 4 taxes. Let's first start with the federal income tax. You might already know this because you might already have a job, and you'll probably be knowing this and experiencing this your entire life. But the federal government has a system set up to decide how much of your money they're going to take before you get your paycheck. And it's generally based on how much you make and whether you're married or by yourself, and if you have a lot of children or whatever. But you can see based on this chart how much they're going to take. So let's say you make $100,000 and it's just you. Well, they're going to take 24% of that. So $24,000 is coming their way. Now, you might think that's crazy. That's too much. Well, that's why we vote for people in Congress who could change this law. But right now, this is basically how it is. And of course, that money that they take goes into the big treasury of the United States, and they pay for the Navy, they pay for roads, they pay for how to preserve the bald eagle, they pay for food stamps and welfare, they pay for all of the government programs comes through these taxes. So if you need to pause this and look it up, or look at your bracket or where you might think you might be one day, go ahead. But you can find this on the internet pretty much anywhere. Now let's talk about Ohio. Ohio is one of those states that also has an income tax. So this little chart just shows you how they collect the money. You could pause it and see, but again, it's a little more complicated, but it's not nearly as much as the federal government. But Ohio still needs this money to run programs. States also have sales taxes. So this chart shows you how states do sales tax. And some states, like Ohio, has sales tax. For example, Montana doesn't. But when you buy something in Ohio, it shows you on the receipt there, as you can see, how much has been added to the total to pay for programs in Ohio. Here's a chart county by county. You can see how much each county charges. But generally within Ohio, there's a range that the state allows. Cuyahoga up in Cleveland has the highest, but you can see some with the lowest. So again, you have to be ready for this if you were to buy something. But it's a responsibility. You know, we all want government to be somewhat involved, right? Maybe you think you're not a fan of government at all, but you probably want them inspecting the food that you eat, right? So nothing's free, and taxes pay for programs of the federal government. And finally, one part of being an informed and engaged member of society is perhaps being involved in civic organization. So there's a variety of things that people get involved with. Generally, if you go into a little small town, they tell you all the stuff that you could join in that community, and it kind of gives you an idea to how to give back and be involved in your community. So remember, with great power comes great responsibility. And so hopefully you'll be an engaged member of American society.